Hello, this is David Benezra, your co-host for the Captain's Table. And today we have a new wingman with me, Kevin Stapleton. How you doing, Kev?
Great. Great to be here.
Kev has a great sports background, originally being from the New York area and having gone to Fordham and played sports there. He's an all-sports guy. This will be the eighth installment of this sports podcast, and today we have a very interesting guest in the first hour. We have Rick Young, who is the owner-operator of Fantasy College Hoops. Hello, Rick.
Hey, Dave. How are you?
Good. Rick is joining us from North Carolina. And a disclaimer, I've known Rick for a long time, but have never spoken to him or talked to him until today. And, of course, it doesn't take too much to figure out that, well, I know him because I'm also a Fantasy College Hoops nut. And I've been participating in his business and this thing. I'm not going to call it a business because we're not playing for a huge payout type of a deal. It's just the love of the game. And, I have a lot of questions for you, Rick. First of all, did you grow up in North Carolina?
No, I am originally, birth Boston, but never lived there. Lived in mainly the first 26 years of my life in West Virginia.
Okay.
So I'm a definitely mountaineer, always, no matter what.
Yeah, well, you have the
And
WVA logo, so yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah. And from there, I've lived in North Carolina, Texas, and then back to, South Carolina for a little bit, and then back to North Carolina for the last 19 years.
All those moves work-related, I assume, or?
Yes. I'm in the hospitality business. I've been in that hotel business for 30 years, and it will move you around somewhat.
Off topic, not important, but now that you've been there for 19 years, I mean, North Carolina is supposed to be a pretty nice place. Is that your favorite place that you've lived in? Or if you had your druthers, you'd be back in West Virginia?
If I would have my druthers, I'd be back in Texas.
Oh, really?
Really? Wow.
Yeah, I lived there 7 years. I mean, listen, West Virginia is my home. Will always be where I tell people I'm from. I'm a proud West Virginian, but for my family, for my kids, there was not a lot to aspire to. Let's just put it that way. And I don't mean that in a disparaging way. It's just, I wanted better for them than me. And opportunity-wise, North Carolina, Texas, would much more, expansive.
Sure.
Whereabouts?
Texas.
Whereabouts in Texas?
Go ahead. I worked the whole state, but I lived in the DFW area. I lived in Arlington, which is now the home of the Cowboys. But the stadium was only talked about when I lived there. It was on the verge. But I just had a lot of good people there, and liked the weather, liked the people, all that. But I've also loved North Carolina. I've lived here quite a long time too. I love actually where I live now, which is home of Camp Lejeune, our U.S. Marines. I work in that town, and so that gives you a greater respect for your military. And I do love it here. But if you could say if all the world was right, where would I live? I'd probably live in Texas if we could have.
So let me ask you. I mean, obviously, you don't run a site called Fantasy College Hoops if you don't, really love college basketball. So you've always loved college basketball, but what gave you the idea to do this?
Well, I won't take the full credit. How I got into this league and taking pretty much, I did not create it. I will not take claim for it. There was we're going to go all the way back to the AOL days. I guess I got found on an AOL forum for college basketball fans or something. And there was a guy out of Tennessee, and he had a little basketball league, and he asked me if I want to join, and I did. It was not on the web. It was strictly, email messaging, that kind of.
So was
stuff.
that early to mid 90s, somewhere in there?
Yeah, 1997, 98 range.
Okay.
My first season was 1998, 99. And his name was Gene, and he ran it, just a little small faction, like 12 teams, strictly email. Some of the core bases is still there. And then he, me being a junkie, a stat guy, I've always been a stat guy. So I was like, enjoyed it and had a good season. But then the next year he was having time issues. He wasn't going to be able to put into it. I said, listen, I'll co-manage it with you. That way we can keep it going. And I pretty much took it over. I went to Yahoo GeoCities, which is no longer a site, and created our first infantile web page because I was being me, I had to do it a little bit too much. And I figured it was easier to disseminate information that way. So from there, after that co-managing it, he pretty much left and I kept it going. And then I decided to take it further.
Now, when did you, so that the leagues that you run now all started from that then? You just basically.
From that core idea of we're using real players. I don't think we was using all the players. The scoring format, pretty much the same, with a few maybe a variation or two. But so I took the concept and then I was like, okay, now how can I make it better? And then how can I be more informative? Well, the web. And so the GeoCities thing didn't work. And I said, okay, well, now I'm going to put some money into it. Not because I definitely am not doing this for money. Absolutely not. I do it, as you said, for the love of the game. I love the basketball. And so I said, well, I want to make it. And I bought a website, bought the Fantasy College. There was nobody that had that. So I bought that name. And I had to learn how to do a web page.
I wanted to ask you, you just mentioned it, of course, but so I dabbled in a little fantasy baseball, pro baseball, and actually even fantasy college football, but I wasn't that interested in pro basketball. I was searching for fantasy college basketball, and I think I only found maybe one other person or league that seemed to be out there. There was nothing. You were it.
What year was that?
You were definitely correct.
I don't know what year did I join your league? Rough offhand. 2005.
Well, I tried to do some notes.
Okay.
your league just had their 20th season.
Okay.
And you've been in it from the get-go. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
So I would say about 20 years ago, okay. 2002, 2003.
Yeah. So I'm sorry we cut you off, but yeah, you were saying because there was nothing out there. You were it.
Yeah, there on the web there was nothing. I'm sure that there was little like mine. I guess it initially would have started, just a bunch of friends and let's just have an email text or send out an Excel file or something like that in email format. But I decided to take it to the web. I bought the name rights to that website, and then again, like I said, I had never made a website page. I had no clue what I was doing.
So you were like me, except now you're not like me. You were not a high-tech guy, but now you're a semi-high-tech guy as far as you know your way around what you need to do.
I learn something every day.
Now, also, people should know that you actually run 4 different leagues under the banner of Fantasy College Hoops.
Correct.
Now, I know from our email exchanges that you are a hardworking guy in your real job. So that's a lot,
right.
A lot to manage. First of all, how the heck do you do it? And what drove you to keep expanding? I'm going to guess before, and maybe answer this for you, that maybe at some point you were getting so much interest, you felt you had to expand because only a certain number of teams really works well for a league. After that, it's like there's just not enough talent out there really to distribute.
Right. I'll be honest, to have the 4 leagues that we have now, and I've had more leagues that were like, I had a couple private leagues back in the day that I wasn't technically the commissioner. I was the webmaster, for lack of a better place, or better term. I'll be honest with you. the intention of what we have now was never the intention. The intention was for the league that I had, us to have a site so that it would be easier for anybody. We didn't have to do the whole email chain. We didn't have to do the whole Excel things or anything like that. It was just a place where everybody that was in my little league, which was 12 teams at that time, could go to the site and check the results. And, I updated them, at that time it was a lot more intense on me. I'm not gonna lie, even it was probably more intense, but I wanted it so I would update it daily, but it would probably be at the end of the day. And I did it just so my friends and the people who were in the league, which was, like I said, 12 people, some of them I knew personally, some of them I had never met in my life. So that they had a place to go see it easier. It was not the intent to ever create another league, ever.
And then it became like a Frankenstein's monster.
But what happened? I was living in Texas, and if I talk too much, let me know. But I was in Texas, and a bunch of people I went to church with. It was one of those things like it was taboo. Do I tell anybody that I'm running a fantasy college website?
Yeah, you gotta be on the down low, maybe.
Yeah, but if I found somebody who likes college basketball, especially like I did, or college sports for that matter, really, and I would say, and I got enough trust, I'd say, well, why don't you check this is my little pride and joy that I do on the side, right? It's my passion project for a lot. And I said, look at it, and they were like, oh my gosh, how do I get into that? I said, well, I don't have any openings, I said, most. And it was only 12 of us. And then if I did get an opening, then it was like year 2 or 3, because I was living in Texas really at the start of this. So 1998, 99, I was in Texas when I was there. And so out of the first original 12, after because we had a lot more people leave early on, because especially when you don't know anybody and it's all via like instant messaging on AOL or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I started filtering the players with people I knew, to make it more interesting for me, so we could all rib each other on a Sunday afternoon or evening at church, right? Or 70, and then so out of the first 12, I had the youth pastor, I had the deacons, and for that matter, some of them are a lot of at least the deacon is still with me. His son is took over the team from the youth pastor in the original league. So I had that, and I was like, okay. I let them in, and that way it made more interesting because we had more talking.
I wish I knew that, because sometimes I might be putting a bad word out there on the forum or whatever. I'll have to watch my language.
No, you're perfectly fine. So probably because I had to look it up, because I was like, well, you're going to ask me these questions, and off the top of my head, I'm probably not going to know. So the season, about 4 years into this, year 4, I had the site, and you had to contact me, and I got an email from this guy out of Virginia Beach area named Don, and he was like, man, how do I get in? I said, I don't have any space. I don't have anybody who is leaving, right? And he's like, I've got a whole bunch of me and my friends who would love to be in something like this. He had like 4 or 5 people. I said, okay, tell you what, how about if we can get to 12, I said, or if we can get close to it, I'll put out a feeler. I'll put out that I'm looking for some. If we can get up to 12 people, it'll cost, I threw out a number, because again, this wasn't about money, but I was paying for the website and the domain and all this out of my pocket. And I said, well, how about $15? For a team. There's no prize money. This is strictly you're paying for the website. And they were like, yes. I said, well, when they instantly said yes, I knew I had the price too low. Then,
hey, listen, I got to cut you off for a second. We're going to take a break for commercial.
Yeah.
But hold that thought, because I want to come right back to that.
Will do.
Hi, it's David Benezra with Kevin Stapleton, and we are back with our guest, Rick Young, who runs Fantasy College Hoops. And we're just talking about going back in the day, how they expanded. So real quick, so your first league, I'm assuming, must have been the NC2A that you have.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
And so now
Yes.
you're going to expand, you're telling us, into a second league. And which is the second league then?
The IBL.
The IBL,
Invitational.
okay.
The Invitational Basketball League.
Gotcha.
Is what they decide. I let them kind of come up with a name. So, like I said, he had a guaranteed 5 people. And I was like, well, that's pretty good. So I put out the feelers, between AOL. I can't remember if it was I don't think it was Facebook at that time. I think it was strictly AOL and some other stuff. And then I just got found on the web. People had found me, and they were like, they would email me, if you ever have an opening, let me know. And I was like, sure. I would keep a little list. And now I was like, okay, maybe I'll create a second league. There's enough of people like me out there. If there's enough of them, then I want to give them something. Because it was just a junkie in me. I mean, growing up, if I'd have had something like this, it would have been my dream. So I said, okay. So I got a father and son of a Philadelphia, who are still, all these people are still in that league, by the way.
Wow.
They're all still there.
That's great.
And then I had 2 brothers out of California. One who went to UCLA, one to Cal. Don't ask me how that family works. And then I had, so that was probably the core 8 of the league that's still there, and then, or 8 or 9. And then there was a couple of stragglers. And this is also where you learn, because I was like, okay, I'm the commissioner of it, but I kind of want them to have some investment in it. The core rules are not going to change. The scoring's not changing, but they didn't like the tournament setup of, using total points because there's a game disparity. And I said, okay, well, we can do average. Well, the first champion of that league gamed the system. He started somebody that didn't have any games, because we were doing total points divided by the games in the first year. Well, if you game the system, he gamed it and he won. And I said, okay, well, that's not going to happen anymore. So now that's the reason why the current format, which is we still use average, as you well know, Dave, but it's sum of the average, the sum of the total. So if you have a 0 in there, that doesn't help you.
Yeah.
As you well know.
Oh, yeah.
So I said, we're not going to let somebody do that again. And from that point on, it's the tournament scoring is the same as it was 20 years ago for every league but the NCAA league. And then the very next season, you and some others, I had got up to 16. Well, I think I had 16 teams in the first one, or 12, and then we expanded. But then the next year, I had you and Mark and a whole bunch of others were like, I got emails and how do we get in this? There was you, Mark. I had 2 Marks.
Yeah.
Mayamura.
Mayamura and Barrakoff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I said, okay. And then you guys hit me and I was like, all right, let's do a third one. And that one, originally, we just called it the FCBL 3, Fantasy College Basketball League number 3. Nothing, I didn't even give a choice in it. And then the next year I had enough for another. I had a lot, but I also there's only so much bandwidth that I have. And so I got up to 4 leagues, and I said, that's it. That's it for me personally, trying to control it, run it, and do everything.
Well, yeah, because even though you've got some things that are maybe automatically doing some stats for you, you've got to do the stats for four leagues.
Got to correlate the whole thing.
And by the way, I want to say, I have learned over the years he is the stat master, because I'm a nut, so I can't wait to see what my guys did. Right? I'm doing every game.
He challenges me.
Yeah, and so when it comes out, he'll say your guy had 21, and I'll say, no, wait a minute, I had him for 22 or 23. And he's good about it. I guess he's double checking. He looks, he says, nope, it's 21. And then
you double check and
double
find
check,
out he was right.
Like, He's right. So I can't remember the last time I challenged him because I'm like, I think maybe one time he was off once out of like maybe 10, 15 times. I can't remember the last time I've even worried about it. Just when he says it, that's it.
Gospel.
So, yeah, definitely.
Well, but what do I tell you every time on the email? I said, thank you, because I want it to be right.
Yeah.
And I would rather go back and double check it and make sure that I got it right, because also from where I get my stats from, there could be a correction,
Right.
overnight.
Yeah.
And I have had that where they had 5 blocks when I did my data pool, but now they had 4 or something, and I'm not infallible. That's the reason why I tell everybody, I was like, if you think I made email me, text me, I will check into it. If it's wrong, I would much rather have it fixed than would drive me nuts to be wrong.
But how long does it take you to do each league stats wise?
My longest days are Saturday morning, and that's because our weekend's on Friday night. So, now I'll be honest with you. When I first started, this could be a divorce thing happening, because
I was going to get to that. Okay.
because it was taking a lot of time. Now, technology has helped me out. I've learned a lot. I've learned how to expedite stuff. I've self-taught myself on Excel more than even in my work. How can I use it better? The web page, I had to redesign the whole web page, 3 years ago. That was, but I think it's actually pretty good now. Because the format before, I was always having errors in my servers, and that was causing.
I remember you going through that. That was a chore, but yeah, it works really well.
So I think the new one's working much better now. This year was the newer. I had changed it up again, and I think it's much better. And I'm always looking to try to improve it, that. And then the first years when I used to do this with my wife, I'm like, thank God I have my wife, and she understands that I'm a nut, because it could have been trouble. I'm not gonna lie, it could have been a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
But again, over time, I've learned how to make it more efficient. Now, I have 4 leagues, and I have a lot of files that are intricate and linked together, which help. But I still have a lot to manually do. So Saturday mornings for me, it's like, plus I'm waiting on lineups, which is a pain.
Yeah.
But as far as the actual just updating the stats and the results and all that, for 4 leagues, it's a few hours, but it's fun hours, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
That's amazing that you can get all that done in
hopefully,
that amount of time.
This is like a confession as far as my how nutty I am. I even look into the next week's lineups to see who's gotten their lineup in there, because I want to see if, of the 2 teams I'm facing, who they've got. And I'll do that several times, and I'll notice that the day of starting a new week, I'll go in there and there still might be anywhere from 2 to 5 guys that haven't put their lineups in, and I'm thinking, oh, this has got to be a pain in the ass.
Yeah, because Saturday morning, it's updating stats, but it's like, who hasn't sent me a lineup, so that I send out a blanket email. I said, you got 2 hours, hurry up. And that's about as forceful as I get. And I'm like, listen, I need the lineup, or I'm going to use your lineup from last week, and say la vie. That could be good or bad.
Yeah.
And during the regular season, you really don't want to roll over your lineup, because there's the games issues. In the tournament, people do it all the time, but during regular season, games matter.
Yeah. Yeah.
How many games you have matter. During the tournament, not so much, but so regular season, that could hurt you.
Well, yeah, for people who might not quite understand what you're saying, what Rick's talking about is that, during it's total points during the regular season. So if you can start a lineup that has 16 games and your opponent has 14 games, obviously your odds of outscoring them are greater. But then you go to playoffs and it's averages, like you said. You take the scoring averages of the players during the week. So the total number of games don't matter. In fact, that leads to something interesting because you have to make a decision. Okay, my guy only has one game this week. Is he a stud? And I don't care. I'm going to gamble that he's going to have one of his usual games, or do I bench him because I got another guy that has two, and I want to be able to balance it just in case we have a bad game, good game type of. And some guys have three, and to me, I don't like seeing three either. In fact, I prefer two or 1 to 3 when it comes to playoffs because that's a lot of games. It's late in the season. You're likely to get one bad, one not so good, and then maybe we got a good game, and it doesn't average out that well usually. Usually.
Yeah, but you don't know which one to put in.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's why you got to be a nut. I mean, you talk about your wife. My wife's been pretty good. When it's fantasy basketball season, I'm in my little back room there on the computer poring over things. I'll even see, how did this guy do against this opponent earlier? How does he do on the road? How does he do all this stuff? So, I'm really into that. And I want to allude to something, or you alluded to something earlier about letting guys invest. And so I was able to push through for our league. Of course, they had to be approved. But how many free agent ads drops you could make? I don't remember what it was, but I wanted more.
It was The original setup was there was preseason moves before the regular season started. So like after the draft, you had four drops before the regular season,
and you had to use it or lose it.
And use it or lose it, and then you had 3 during the season. Now, these were regular moves, not injury related or, that stuff. So in a total, you had 7. You heavily influenced and pushed for the change of how about we just do it all carte blanche whenever you want, as opposed to these 4 that I don't know.
And then 3.
How they're going to. Right. So instead of having 4 preseason, and if you use it or lose it, and then 3 during the season, we went to a total of now it's 8. And you can use it right after the draft until you have to the end of the regular season to use them. Now, these are your quote free moves, meaning you don't have to have a reason to drop a player. You can drop them because you don't like it or whatever. Or you have, like Dave's highly aggressive. Yeah, I think that would shock you, but I'm sure he's highly aggressive when it comes to moves. He is that. I don't wish all owners were like that, but I do wish more owners had a little bit more aggression. But I won't get into that. But
I will when you're through with this. Yeah.
Right. And so the 8 moves, you can turn over 67% of your team, basically. So the original format was like my NCAA league is still that way. You have 4 preseason and you have 3 during the season.
It's tough. But I think that's the most competitive league.
Which means you better be selective with your moves. And the other 3 leagues, I adopted your league situation, which, for the record, that league is no longer called FCBL. I want to make sure we honor the name of that league. Mark My Aura League. We changed the name of the league to honor Mark, and it's been that way since that unfortunate time. But because he was also valued, he would contribute to me emails. He used to tell me he loved it because he could find those hidden gems.
Yeah.
and so that meant a lot to me, that it meant a lot to somebody else. So all 3 leagues other than the NCAA league, they have 8 moves they can do. Yeah.
Well, I know
there's I could talk forever, but it's like that's not injury related or transferred or they got kicked out of school. Those are different type of moves.
Yeah, I now know more players in college basketball than I ever knew before before fantasy basketball, because I am searching for those guys. And we're going to have to take a break here in a few seconds. Yep. But when we come back, I want to talk to you about how changes in college basketball for real also relate and affect fantasy basketball. So,
yes, sir.
we'll dwell on that for a little bit, and we'll come back in a few seconds. So, this is David Benezra. We're going to take a short commercial break. We are listening to Rick Young, who runs Fantasy College Hoops. Hello, everybody. We are back with Rick Young. We're discussing pretty much everything you want to know about fantasy college basketball, and that includes yours truly and my co-host, Kevin Stapleton. So, Rick, when we left off, we were talking about hidden gems that the late Mark Maimura, enjoyed finding for college fantasy basketball. And I got to tell you, that was my, of course, I had to stumble through and figure everything out, but because I was so into it, early on, I came to the philosophy that I'd rather have a player from, say, NJIT, although at the time there was no NJIT Division I,
Right.
than North Carolina, because chances were that I could actually get more fantasy points out of a dominating player at a lower level.
Yeah, of course.
And I felt that worked pretty well for a long time. But what I want to talk to you about is how the real world is a big part of college fantasy basketball. And so now with the portal and the transferring and everything else, and the fact that also technically they've almost tried to legislate defense out of the game, there's not that much of a difference anymore. I mean, it's good to find guys that nobody knows about maybe that you can get, but there's not so much of an advantage in taking a player from Vermont over a player from Minnesota or Texas or whatnot. What do you say to that?
Yeah. I mean, I hate the portal.
Yeah,
but
we all do.
And for league purposes, who it's hurt is the ones who don't put the time into it. And the reason why I say that, because years ago I started sending out the file with the last year's stats of the free agents, right? I did that for a couple reasons. One, to expedite the draft process. Makes it, if you had the data, you're not searching for it, it's there. But the problem now is all that stats is from when they were at Stony Brook.
Yeah.
And now they're at North Carolina. Those are not comparable. They go from being the star at their lower division,
being a role player.
Now and to a role player, which decreases their fantasy value to nothing. And for somebody like you, Dave, myself, probably about another 15, in all four leagues, probably about 15, 20 owners, they don't just look at that file and go, okay, that's the gospel. That file is not meant to be your guide to draft. That file is to give you information so you can go do research and see if that will be who you pick. But as you know, too many people look off the file and saw that Joe Smith averaged 15 points, or his fantasy average was 25 last year. Wow, that's who I'm going to jump on. But yeah, he was at, as you said, New Jersey IT. He's now at Seton Hall. It doesn't work.
Well, I use the draft file also now, and because of linked into what you're talking about, I know that certain guys. I'm not saying a certain guy like I know each guy, but certain teams are going to not put that work in, and so let's say these guys are ranked in order of highest scoring, fantasy scoring average to lowest. So let's say I'm picking last in the first round or next to last. But a lot of guys are going to take freshmen. So there's maybe only going to be one or two guys taking non-freshmen ahead of me. So what I look at is I may actually like player B as far as my choice than player A if I'm looking at two different guys. But I won't take, I can wait because somebody's going to take the number one ranked guy. Somebody's going to take the number 3 or 4 best player. And, I look at that and I say, boy, I can wait. I could take player A because he's higher. He may go faster, but I can wait and still get my actual number one pick in the next round, or if it's, snaking and it works out that way, I can go back to back. But it doesn't matter, of course. But there's a whole strategy to everything.
Oh, see, for me, one of the reasons I liked the star at the mid to lower was because I got to keep them longer.
That's true. Yeah.
And I know it sounds crazy, but I tried to build a program, not a roster.
That was my philosophy. We're kindred souls.
So I know that sounds crazy in the fantasy world, but it is a keeper league. So if you draft somebody in the first round that's a freshman and you're lucky enough that it's actually a good freshman, then great. You got him for 4 years, hopefully 3 years, hopefully. But if you're getting the Kentucky freshman, you got him for 1 year.
Yeah.
And I would much rather I've always tried to build stability on my team where I have an even balance of stayovers and then some draft picks,
Yeah. Yeah. Of course, that's getting harder. I mean, the one and done thing is not that hard to figure out, but all of a sudden you take a guy and he's jumping, like you said, through the portal, and that changes his value. And wow.
Yeah, and for me, that's changed even worse because now in the off season, if they stay at the same school, that's not somebody I have to worry about eliminating from a roster. Now, because as you know, I don't hold you indebted to that. If somebody transferred, I'm going to give you the option and you can drop them before the draft or keep them, as you know, because I don't feel like that is fair that you drafted him when he's at Stony Brook, but now he's at Michigan.
Right.
That's not apples to apples. So I give you the option. So now where I think I'm going to only have a draft with 100 open spots, now with the portal, I might have 120, 125. So that just makes it go longer. That's my favorite season is draft season, but it's also my most stressful.
Yeah. And, as far as I started doing draft research this past season. Back in January, I started, which is earlier than I normally do, just because of all these complications. I felt I needed more prep time, but I'll tell you, I feel like I'm ready. If you want to start the draft on May 1st, June 1st, I am all in.
Dave, you're ready. You're ready as soon as the tip off of the game ended and the confettis on Monday night.
That's right.
And honestly, I am too. It's just it is my favorite season. I do love it. That part, it's enjoyable because that's really the most active that I have with all the owners, with emails and texting and draft picks and me. I'm trying to manually keep that draft flowing in 4 leagues at one time. Now I am fortunate that 2 of the leagues, the league I'm in and the second league, they are in no hurry. But your league and the League 4, for the last several years, we have not had to have a live draft, and it's been exceptionally easy because honestly, you're in the West Coast, I'm in the East Coast. That is a significant time difference.
Yeah,
to try to work around.
Yeah,
that's what I try to.
I love the fact that you run it so that we, whoever wants to start the draft once we get to a certain point can do that, so we don't have to do the draft. At the same time, it's funny. I kind of miss having to be there on Saturday at my house for 3 or 4 hours, whatever, going through every pick because, you're watching the feed, you're seeing who's picking right there, and you can comment about it and think about it and the whole 9 yards.
Well, every pick before you changes. Your pick.
That's right.
So
that's right.
You got to be on top of it.
God, if that was a live feed, you would probably have to censor me because sometimes you figure you've got this guy and you're watching and pick by pick it's good, and then there's one pick and you're saying yes, I'm going to get this guy, and of course that guy takes your guy.
Well, and here's the thing: like your league and the other 3 leagues that I'm not in. As Dave said, you can almost check it up the first round, with the exception of Dave and then probably maybe one other person in the other three leagues. That whole first round is just go look at the top 10 freshmen, and that's going to be your picks without any measure of research. They just, because you're required to have, I mean, for context, you're required to have a freshman on the team and a freshman starter. So everybody jumps to that first, leaving, as Dave likes to let them know, players on the table. And, you know, and like, I love it. He'll email me, it's falling my way. It's falling my way.
You know, I wonder.
Now,
I'm sorry. I try not to. I have a writing background, and I'm really into your league, and so I couldn't help it, even though it's not to my advantage. You know, this what he just talked about was. It struck me that why are all these guys taking the freshmen, and of course you're picking in inverse order, right? So you're the worst team in the league. You're picking first, and now you need like 4 guys, starters in a 7-man lineup, and you're gonna take a freshman who likely, like Rick said, is one and done. It just made no sense to me. So I started writing about that, but I tried to temper myself. I didn't want to seem like I'm on top of the mountain talking to everybody about it, but I've written about it several years, and I think the last time I wrote, I decided, you know what, I'm just not going to write about this anymore. If these guys want to do that, that's fine. It's their team. It's their philosophy. I've put it out there, and, you know, they're welcome to do it the way they want to do it, but I just don't get it. So
I don't get it either, but like I said, like my draft and my league is totally different. The first 2 or 3 might be freshmen, but top 3 freshmen. But after that, for the most part, you will see upperclassmen. Now, I will say, I'm saying that, yet I'm the guilty sin. I committed the cardinal crime this year of taking G.G. Jackson because he was sitting there, and I was like, well, the rest of my team is looking pretty good. And for the record, my team did win, just like Dave's did this year. So I was sitting with a good lineup. And I was like, well, I'll just go ahead and take the freshman. And that was the worst pick I could have possibly made. I was so glad he declared. I'm so happy he declared.
It's a temptation. I mean, I've done it, and I already had that philosophy, and I did it with one of the Knight kids who played at Kentucky, I think, when he was a freshman. I did it maybe one other time.
Did you regret it both times?
It wasn't horrible, but it's really a wasted move, and here's why. So now my discipline is not involving not picking the freshman in the first round. It's like not picking one period. I went from that to saying, okay, maybe 10th round, 11th, 12th, 13th round, I'll pick a guy. But actually, I know that it's wise to not pick one at all, but sometimes you have panic. It's like...
Yeah, but wait a minute. You have to start a freshman.
Yeah, right? But I don't have to pick one right away, right?
Right.
Okay.
He's got about... When their draft is, Dave's got about 2 weeks before the regular season starts.
Right.
So he's very keen at, like I said, making it, then trying to analyze I'm not speaking for you, but analyzing scrimmages, all that stuff.
You're right. And, one time I was tempted, I was actually going to pull the trigger on Garza, who went to Iowa. And that was because I'm even watching in the summer, a team gets to travel once every 4 years. Yeah. Iowa went to Italy. He had he led the team in scoring by far every game, which is unusual for a big kid. And actually, I was going to take him, but somebody, of course, took him, which saved me. Garza would have been a great one, as it turned out. But
absolutely, yeah.
But it's much better. This past year, I got a freshman late. I got the kid from Pepperdine, Javon Porter, and I tried to work out a trade, which we got to talk about in a second, because trades are really difficult to do. That's why he's laughing. Yeah, it's like trades are rare. That's like headline news, trade. I used him in a trade to get a player I wanted, but of course now I needed a good freshman. And I was able to get, since I gave him a good freshman, my trading partner didn't have any problem with, picking up a freshman because he had a lot of moves left to make in the free agent pool. And I wound up with this kid, David Noel from Wright State. And he turned out to be, I think, one of the top 3 freshmen or something like that in the league.
As did I. He was on my team too.
There you go. And we're going to take a break right there on that positive note. We'll be back with Rick Young. And we are back with Rick Young, who is the guru of fantasy college hoops, which he has 4 leagues under that aegis. And we're talking about draft. And, Rick, of course, doesn't just run the leagues. He has a team. He's been a very successful franchisee, if you want to put it that way, owner. And so, yeah, I mean, I've never regretted it with the freshman thing. I think that's just the way to go. And by the way, going back to what we were talking about earlier, now when it comes to freshmen, though, that is the one spot where I think it is to your advantage, of course, if you can go low D1 or maybe mid-major. Although, again, portal, but what that means to me is I'm probably going to get 2 to 3 years out of this kid at his school before he transfers to a school where his playing time's going to be cut in half, his field goal attempts, everything, but he doesn't see it that way. It's like his chance to go play at a higher level. I get that, but it almost always doesn't work out. Yeah. So
to me, it rarely works out.
Yeah. Rarely works out at all.
Well, I want to jump in here for a minute.
Oh yeah.
I want to ask. I want to ask both of you this question, and what, in your opinion, is the most important attribute that a guy needs to have to be successful in the fantasy league?
You mean a player, right? As far as picking a player, what you're looking for?
As far as building your team.
Oh, okay.
What's the most important attribute a guy needs to be successful in this kind of league?
Rick, that's definitely to you.
Oh, okay. I think in my league, and I can only speak about because the way our league format, it is still you can call it archaic, but you have to have 2 guards. You start 2 guards, 2 forwards, a center. I give you a 6-man, which is like a wild card, and then you have a freshman start. So 7 of your 13 players are playing every week. I would say, and the way I built my teams, I still build down low and work my way out. Meaning, almost every year I have had a good center. I've had a center that's usually lasted 2 or 3 years, or in Timmy's case, 20.
Seems like it, yeah.
But I've always believed in that philosophy because in my league, here's rebounding and blocks and still travel, even in the real world. So, and in my league, if you're a more aggressive offensive rebounder, like Oscar Schwebe from Kentucky, oh my gosh, he can get you almost 30 points just by never scoring a point.
Yeah.
And so it's you get rebounds and then you have offensive rebounds. So that's more of a how aggressive you are. There's an extra point there, but I believe in that. Guards are harder to get, but I like, and I'll let Dave, because Dave's kind of got a good strategy on this too. But I don't like a player that just scores. I tried that this year. I took Turquovian Smith. I said, I'm going to gamble trying to get me a scorer that maybe that's all they do. I'll never do that again because that's not my strategy, and I'm going to keep to my strategy. I like a player that's multifaceted, rebound, assist, because here's the thing. You're not always going to shoot well. You're not always going to score well. But if you rebound and assist, you're likely to get me. What I don't want is bad games. A bad game will kill you.
Yeah. Single digit fantasy total for a game is what he's talking about. A player who you could have a minus total, but a player who gets a 0 to a 9, that can be hard to overcome unless you're higher price beef, I like to say, or they're really on their game that week. And if you have 2 of those in a week, 2 different players giving you 5 and 8, that's really hard. 3, you are dead. You can overcome 2, but you got to have high level performances from everybody else.
So
and in a tournament week, you're really hurt.
Oh,
You know?
Oh my God. You get it. You literally you get a 0. Well, that means the guy has to score 20 the next time out just for him to average 10 for the week.
Yeah.
10, of course, is not a great number. So, yeah, it's I've started keeping so many stats that I have come to that maybe Rick already kept. I don't know, but so I keep a stat during the year. I want to see how many of my players in the starting lineup are scoring 20 fantasy points or more each week. And that gives me a percentage to work with. And basically, if 58% plus over the course of the season, if I'm getting that 58% of the time of those games, we're in good position as far as we got a chance. I've only been over 60% once, and actually it was funny, we didn't win. That was last year. We had 62% of the time, 62.4 to be exact, because I'm a stat nut. Would average got me 20 points in a week. That's a high number, right? 60%. So, but yeah, you got to be 58 plus. And I've only been doing this number for 7 years, but I wasn't close the 2 or 3 times I was under 58. So that's the number.
So
pretty much 20 or more is your goal, what you're looking for.
Correct.
From your player. Yeah. If you get that, you're getting that. The fantasy stud is pretty much a 25 plus.
Yeah, that's what that's my thing.
Anybody above 30 on average, like Zach Edey and Jake Stevens from this year, oh my God, that's
unheard of, though. Right? I mean, that's
right. It gives you a margin of error, though.
Right.
Yeah.
If you have Zach Edey, or like I had Jake Stevens, and then got injured, and I thought I thought I was doomed. I had the highest scoring team in all 4 leagues this year, as far as total points average per week, and then I lost my best player, who was the only player who could keep up with Edey.
Right.
So,
yeah,
because when I take on Edey, at least the margin of error. My opponent, who I had a better roster but he had that one key advantage, for example. So Stevens versus Edey, he only had me by about 2 points per game, whereas anybody else, he probably had a 10 point average.
Yeah. It's hard to make that up. Yeah. Well, that's why in our league we have a team called the KC Warthogs, and they weren't that strong this year, but they had Zach Edey, and I named it the Edey factor, and they're in playoffs. I think they won their first 2-round playoff games because they had other guys starting to step up at the right time a little bit, but Zach Edey, like he was talking about,
he was like at 40.
You got to overcome that. You can't. It's hard to make up that many points.
Yeah. Well, he was getting, what was he averaging, like 5 blocks a game or something?
Well, for the fantasy season, he's like hot. He had the shots, highly efficient field goal percentage.
Yeah.
And he had 10 plus rebounds. And all this. So for our fantasy season, his final fantasy score average was like 34.5 or 34.6. And Dave will tell you that is almost unheard of. I mean, anybody that averages for the 30 plus for the season, they are like in the
they're in the stratosphere.
It just doesn't.
Yeah. Oh yeah, they're the Hall of Fame. Yeah. Trust me.
Let me ask you something. Who was in all these leagues, who was the highest scorer ever? Average
for a season?
Yeah, for a season.
Wait, for a season?
Yeah.
The highest record. Now, I'm only going to go off my league for right now, but the highest average in one season was Reggie Williams from BMI.
Okay.
Probably about 10, 15 years ago, or somewhere around there.
Yeah.
And what was it?
35 points or 36.1, something like that. Now, Kevin Durant's one season at Texas, he was like 35.1, I think. And Michael Beasley, his 1 year at K-State was like 33, 34. But those were anomalies.
Yeah.
Those are, very rarely do you have a 30-plus season average.
And what did Edey do this year?
I think you said 34.6, right?
34. Oh, so he's up there.
Oh, yeah. He's right there.
He's in the Mount Rushmore. Yeah, he's there.
Right.
I mean, literally, he doesn't need. He can stand beside it. I mean, he's.
And you should also talk about the fact that now by positions, the guards in general score lower in fantasy basketball than the other positions.
Well, they don't block shots.
Yeah, so you're talking about the freshman thing, whether it's tempting to choose a freshman. So my new temptation is I really want to go best player available and not worry about if I already have two great forwards or a center. But I'm tempted if a guard is close to the best player available of late. We've had some good guards, but of late it's been so difficult to get a good guard who's fairly steady that I could easily flip and say, okay, you know what? I'm going to take the guard, even though this guy's going to average 3 points more. I mean, I had, I think it was last year. It's time passes so much, but I had 3 forwards that all scored 25 to 30, but we didn't do anything because the guards were just so, flat, so blah. Yeah.
And another, if you can get the good combo, if you have somebody that's basically a forward, but he
can play guard,
and he's listed as a guard forward, then you can use him as a guard. So that's your hope.
So you look for those guys.
There are some smaller school places, and I mean, honestly, the game has transitioned. The biggest problem now is, and I had to adapt and change again, was the lack of centers. So I've had to use more resources to create more centers in the last 3 years because, no kid wants to be called a center anymore.
Yeah.
So
now you go center forward.
This is where I really bug Rick. He's been very nice. He hasn't mentioned this, but I'm always finding a guy, and he's listed as a forward on the team's website, right? But he's the biggest guy. He's 6'11", 240. What else is he going to be? At least defensively, he's got to match up against the center, so he's a center. And it's true, but to be fair, Rick has a system that's fair for everybody. He uses a few sources, and if he's not listed as a center on any of these sources,
then you're
out of luck.
You can't call him a center.
You can't call him a center. Yeah.
And listen, and I'm liberal with it, but I'm not that liberal with it. Because again, I want to make sure that it's equal. What I don't want to become is my decision.
Yeah, I get that. Now, I also want to say, over the years, it's like, to me, rebounding is the most important stat. And it depends, like even with the guards. I mean, if a guard is a high percentage and or gets a lot of threes, doesn't turn over a lot, so you have a plus as far as assist to turnovers.
You can get 6 or 7 assists a game.
Yeah, he can get fewer rebounds, but I really am looking, even for guards, I'm looking for 5 rebounds a game or more for a guard. I want my forwards to be 8 and up, and I want my centers to be 10 and up if I can find it. So
well, Dave, you should talk about. I mean, Dave, and I inputted into my stats, or as far as the team stats overall. He has like a plus minus on players. He came out with, and then I was able to incorporate it into my overall team stats for everybody during the season. So it was plus minus. He had created, like, if they averaged 20 points a game, but their fantasy value was 22, then they're a plus 2. But if they're a 15-point fantasy average, they're a negative player. You don't want negative players.
Yeah. We don't want to see those guys. Not at all.
No negativity.
That's what I love. I have, I'm sure other guys are doing this or have done it, but I've created all these stats because you're always looking for an edge, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm always thinking about, well, how can I find out, as far as predictability, I should say. So how can I try to get more predictability about what a guy is going to be able to do? Which stats are the key stats? And how do you, sort of blend that into everything? And that's what I love. I'm a stat guy. And we haven't even talked about, not only does Rick do the stats for the year, the all-time records. So all the teams in our league, he has stats for, since the leagues have started, their total rebounds, their offensive rebounds, steals, points they've scored, all that. So I looked in there, and that was part of what also made me really understand that, when I started, the power in our league was triple threat. Triple threat's no longer in the league, but I looked at triple threat.
He's still in the other league. He's Cal. He's the original Cal team, Cal Bears.
Okay. And I determined early on that, boy, rebounding, because also you get the extra point for the offensive rebounding, but rebounding is something that's probably more important than anything. I wasn't concerned about assists, really. I wasn't concerned about blocks or steals. Rebounds, because you can count on it. You can't count on shooting, right? A guy might have a cold shooting night, but a rebounder always rebounds the ball, right? That's like 1 out of 100 times that he's going to have a horrible game, whether it's foul trouble or whatever. So you look in there, and I see that we lead the league over these 20 years in total rebounds. That's something that's important to me. I look at all those stats and the other stats because we've been lucky. We've picked well with some guys that, who knows what's going to happen. We're close to the top in assists and all that. Oh, and it sounds like I'm praising myself. So I'm going to put this one in there for Rick. He'll get a kick out of this. We are also year after year pretty much consistently number one in turnovers too. I don't know where that comes from, but I think part of that is the other stat I look for besides rebounds is I want guys for the most part who take a decent amount of field goal attempts. Otherwise, you're really counting on them to be really accurate. We had a guy, I can't remember his name. He wasn't on my team. He was a decent fantasy player. He played at Vermont, and he literally was scoring 6.2 points per game. But his fantasy total was 17 or 18 because that's how good he was all around. But he couldn't get higher than that because he's never taken any shots. So maybe because I'm taking guys who take a lot of shots, because we've also had the most field goal attempts career, maybe those guys, because they're taking more shots or doing more things, getting more turnovers. So you got to deal. The turnovers don't bother me anymore. At first, I would look at the weekly and say, "Oh my God, we had 36 turnovers this week. No other team had more than like 27. We can't keep going like this." But it doesn't really matter. Turnovers don't matter that much if you're doing everything else pretty much.
Hey, let me ask you guys something. Can you predict by looking at the history of the other teams in the league? Can you predict how they're going to draft? If you're waiting on a player, can you look at that and think, well, wait a minute, these guys draft rebounders, or can you predict and hold off on or take a player because you think, well, according to their history, they like rebounders. This guy rebounds. I better get this guy now because he's not going to be.
Rick, do you see that in your league?
All right. Well, my league, I can pretty much tell you, my league, for the most part, tendencies are like, I know certain owners are already ahead of it. And so I don't know about them taking a particular type of player.
Type of player, yeah.
I just know they're going to take. I just know that they're going to take my player.
Yeah, that's how it seems to go. Go ahead.
Go ahead. And like in your league, Dave, I can rest assured that probably, I would say maybe top half, the predictability is on what type of player they're going to take. And there are certain owners, and I'm not disparaging anybody that's in my league because they've been in my leagues for a while, but they have not figured out 4 freshmen on a team does not work. Or just taking a player from your favorite school doesn't work.
Doesn't work. Yeah.
But here's the thing. I honestly do not care who you pick as long as you are enjoying the game.
Yeah.
And your enjoyment might not be the way I enjoy it, but I want, as long as you and going off my attrition rate being very small, they keep coming back. And I do stuff that I don't even like Dave said, I love the history of it. So I keep my keeper league might be different than somebody else's. I give you history. I'm going to give you probably more data than you want. If you ask me, can you make this? Dave's done many times. Say, do you have this? I said, yeah, I can make that. I can do that. I'm all for making it that. And he might have something that my other guys might like. And if only 3 or 4 people enjoy it, but those 3 or 4 people enjoy it, and it doesn't take super time from me.
Yeah, you're going to put it in.
And I've got I'm going to put it on there, and I have put it on there. The league started with us with a bunch of sports, college basketball loving junkies. How I used to, when I first started, this was something that in high school, the reason my email, which I will not verbalize, you know what it is. I got that name in high school because I used to do that when there was no internet. I used to go to the library and look up box scores, from the newspapers, and played, like Stratomatic, and I played some simulation games.
I played Stratomatic. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Well, there was a basketball version. I don't know if you ever knew it. So there was not by Stratomatic, but there was one like that. I used to play that at my grandmother's house, and I had Alonzo Mourning, and I was a Hoya Destroyer fan. So,
Well, Rick, we could definitely use another hour with you, and at some point we might have to bring you back on.
Anyway, maybe you call me back. I hope that it was worth your time.
It was wonderful. You were great, and it was fun getting into this. And there's a lot of people interested, of course, as you know, in fantasy sports. So thank you very much. You were a great guest.
You were, Rick. Thank you.
Dave and Kevin, thank you guys. And if you ever need me, call me again.
Take care.
We will.
That was Rick. That was Rick Young with the Captain's Table. And that is the end of this particular segment of our podcast. Thank you.